I'll take you through how to actually bandage a leg with lymphedema with the Mobiderm products that we've already discussed. So to start with, I've done my foot, and the foot must always have some compression on it if you're going to go through a series of bandaging of perhaps 3 to 5 days, depending on the severity of the limb. We're going to use 4 bandages for this process. The first bandage is our cotton bandage, which is 100% Egyptian, and this actually helps to protect the skin. Our second bandage is our roll of Mobiderm. This is the 15 times 15 millimeter squares. Our third bandage is our short stretch, which I also, and you'll see in our literature, is called the nighttime bandage. This bandage is on day and night. If you've got a client who is perhaps palliative care or diabetic, they could use these first 3 levels of bandage up to this in the daytime and nighttime, no problems at all. They would not use this bandage, which is the one, if you've seen the earlier video, this is called our Biflex 16 Plus. This is a medium stretch bandage, and what this medium stretch bandage does is really interplay with this Mobiderm, so that when you're walking around in the daytime, you're getting the maximum effect of that micro massage into the tissue, thus stimulating the initial lymphatics and then encouraging the pickup of the fluid and the acceleration of the system. So this is my Biflex 16 Plus, which we've seen before, with the squares. Gives me my force 1 and my force 2 compression. So now I'll continue on with the bandaging. Because I've already done Victoria's foot, I just need to start with the actual ankle. If I was only going to do bandaging for perhaps a day, I might just start with this loosely over the foot and then up the rest of the leg. Now this does come in the option that you can cut the end of it and make it into a tube, but I strongly advise that you use this in the method of a 50% overlay, because that gives you 4 layers of covering of protection on the skin. So I'm going to start with where my Mobiderm is going to start, which is just down here at the ankle. And I'm not really applying any pressure when I put this on, and it's just a 50% spiral. And you can see that I'm not leaving any gaps. If you get a little bit of a crease or a bit of a bubble in here, it doesn't matter as much because it's really protecting the skin. It's very different to the traditional multi-layer bandaging where you have a really high grade of compression. When I get closer to the knee, I'm going to ask Victoria to bend her knee. I'm just going to do a little bit closer than 50-50 because I want to make sure that there's not going to be any gaps when Victoria goes off to drive later. So if you can just bend your leg a little bit, no gaps, bend your knee, and also making sure it's not tight below the knee. Remember, with this product, what we're really aiming for is for people to move, because the more they move, the more reduction they're going to get, the more they will stimulate their lymphatics. So I need to get right up to here. I've run out of bandage, that's fine. I just ask my patient to hold that little bit there for me, thanks. And I go to my next roll. You'll usually find that you'll need 2 of these on every leg. You can also, of course, just bandage the lower limb if you want to. Now, because I'm going to join it here, I'm really making sure I'm not putting any extra pressure on, but I am just going to go over that little bit again. I get Victoria now to bend her leg and pop out her thigh to here, and I get quite close up and into the thigh there. And now I'll ask Victoria to hold that little bit there. I could cut that, but I'll show you an option of how to use that without cutting. So now I get my Mobiderm roll, and with this I want to make sure the bandages kiss or do a little bit more than kiss. So kissing of the bandage is when they just touch each other, so I want to make sure that perhaps one foam over. definitely not 50-50, it doesn't need to be. The Mobiderm only works where it needs to work. So now I'm just going to start to spiral up. And here I go. So again, you can see I'm making sure there's no gaps. Just a 50-50 overlay. Sorry, no 50-50 overlay. And when I get to behind the knee, I'm again just going to put a little bit more coverage just to make sure that there's actually no gaps. So here I am going to do a little bit of almost 50-50. And I get Victoria to bend her knee just a little bit and down to here. And that's my first section. I'd always make sure I'm going to get over the knee. If I've finished here and I've only got to this part of the knee, I'm going to cut off a little bit of bandage or just start my next bandage down here. So I've got a continuation up over the knee. You don't want to stop in the knee joint itself. Get my second box of Mobiderm here. When they come out the box, they're quite tightly rolled up, and that's a great way to apply it. You'll find that they'll open up a little bit the more you actually use it. So here I am. I'm going to go through. Just start a little bit over where I finished, and now I continue on. And through I go. Now, if I've got a little bit left over here, I can just cut it, or sometimes I might use it for something else. If they're a person who's got a really big edematous leg, I might actually wrap a little bit of that around their waist and then tie it off with the other bandages to really stop it from slipping. This product doesn't slip very much because it's quite bouncy on the body when it works. So with my leftover cotton bandage here, I just roll it down. And that just gives a nice little bit of extra support onto the bandage, saves cutting it. So now I start with my flexi deal, and this is an 8 centimetre flexi deal. It's quite, I like to call it a light short stretch. It's not a traditional short stretch, so it has quite a bit of movability still within it. What this bandage does is help reduce filtration, but also aid with the movement of the Mobiderm. These first 3 layers are what you can use with your palliative patient, your diabetic patient, your cerebral palsy patient, anybody who doesn't really have good muscle function. With this technical way I apply, 50% overlay, and then what I like to call the tug and squish effect, and that helps to mould this on. I do a little tail, happy tail to lock it in. Happy tail because the tail's up. I give it a little squish and tug. So here I start my 50% overlay, tug and squish. Tug and squish. Tug. I'm really squishing that in. You can see already how much it's coming in. I often say to patients, when you start to put it on, they get a little bit concerned that it's going to be that bulky, and I say it's going to be half the size of that once you're on. So I'm really squishing this in. I think this is the layer to be most careful with applying, because it's the one that can really make a difference to how the patient functions. If it's too tight, they can't move around as much. So with this bandaging, it's a less is more effect. The less compression you have, the more the Mobiderm works. If you have too much compression on, like you use really hard short stretch, you're really just squashing the foam on. You're not actually aiding the foam in moving and creating the shear effect and stimulating the lymphatics. So here I am at the knee. I'm just going to make sure that I've got enough coverage there, which is great. And now I need to open my next flexi deal. Like most lymphedema therapists, I throw the clips out. So because I've really ended just up where the knee is, that's not that fantastic, and that's just because everybody's body's different, as you would know when you see lymphedema legs. So I'm just going to pull this back just a little bit and do that, and I'm going to start the next bandage so it's really got no pressure from here. And that's because I want to make sure there's not going to be any popping out on the knee whatsoever. And if I finish the bandage or start the bandage over the knee, what happens is later on, that might slip out. You can see there's absolutely no slipping whatsoever, and that's what we want. It's great if you've got a patient like Victoria here who can move her leg for you. Of course, we know in reality that's not always the case. So I do this all the way up the thigh, and this is what they wear for 24 hours, this standard of bandaging. And I've just run out here, but that will go right up to the thigh. So usually for a full leg, you need to have 2 cotton, 2 boxes of Mobiderm and 3 flexible bandages. So this is what they wear for 24 hours. For daytime use only, we then use our Biflex bandage. Now this bandage, as I showed you before, has the 2 different grades of compression. I'm going to start with Victoria with just Force 1 here, which is the middle of the square. What I love about these products too is that I've done a lot of work with patients and their family members or partners to actually teach them how to bandage. And we've got self-bandaging information sheets as well. So again, happy tail has no tension. So here's my happy tail pointing up. And then I start the bandage around down here. As with all medium stretch, they're a bit bouncy. And then I start. So I'm going to do Force 1. So I'm lining the bottom of the bandage up in that square. Now, as I mentioned before, less is more. So when I say a square, it's that square. It's not that kind of square. You're always better to have a patient who's going to be compliant with a little less compression than with more compression. And Mobiderm itself won't work as efficiently if you have too much compression on, because it's this bandage that really aids with the pressure differential of the muscle movement to stimulate the Mobiderm. Now I'm coming up to the knee again, so I just get Victoria to lightly bend. Now I'm going to ease off the tension just a little bit while I go over the knee, so I can go a little bit closer to make sure again that there's not going to be any gaps. So now I get Victoria to bend her knee, and you can see no gaps, and you can also see how flexible she is in this bandaging. So this bandaging protocol is so that you can actually move around in it. The more you move with this brown bandage on, which in the literature we call the daytime bandage, the more the Mobiderm is going to work. If you can just hold that little piece under there, can you? Thank you. And I'll just show you how I start another bandage on, because that's often a question I get asked. So I've strapped that one on. I now get my next one. I get rid of my clips again. Don't like using clips. Because I'm starting where the last one was, I'm not going to put a lot of pressure over here. Just really get them to move their thigh if they can. Drop the bandage. And actually I'll get a 16 plus, because that was a 17 plus anyway. So just gives a higher grade of compression, class 3 and class 4. So this, if we imagine this 17 plus, so 16 plus, I go from here. Then I take through and I really get the patient to lean their thigh into me. Which is great. Now, I'm going to ask Victoria to stand up just so I can show you how we can finish off the bandage if you've got a really bulbous thigh. So if you can step off here and stand up. So what I can do, if they've got a really big bulgy thigh out here, I can come into there and then I can wrap it around the waist like this. And that's a nice way to hold it up. And they can still go to the bathroom with that one like that. You take that off, but that's a nice way to hold it up. I'll just get Victoria to stand, do a little circle for me. It's my little cut off bit of Mobiderm there, and round to the side. And you can